At this time, we will move over to bill number 7729, and Representative Guthrie has four bills that are pretty identical, and that's 7305, 7379, 7381, and 7382. So at this time, I will call up Representative Semini. And is Representative Guthrie here? Representative Guthrie, if both of you can come up and give us an explanation of your bills, please. Good evening and welcome to House Finance.
How's that, better? What I've done is I've introduced four bills just to show the committee and the people of Rhode Island exactly what is generated when you deal with high-income people and a small increase in income tax. You should all have bills. I'll start with the first one, which is 7379. This bill here, if you'll give me a minute. What happened is when I got them from the copy office, it came the wrong way. So what's on the back of yours is on the front of mine. So this is a 1% tax increase on $250,000 and above. The fiscal note would generate for 2013, $32,400,000, and for 2014, $34,352,000. I think it's important that the people of Rhode Island understand what was done when we made. We did the flat tax, and we went on this tax reduction thing for the wealthy, and what that cost has been. The next bill would have been 7381, which is 2% on that same amount, $250,000. That would generate $65 million next year, and $69 million the following year. If we move on to the 1% on income over $500,000, which is pretty close to one of the architects of the flat tax, who is now calling for an increase in the personal income tax on the wealthy. He happens to be in the room, and hopefully he gets up and he supports this bill. This is 2%, 2% over $500,000 would generate $37 million in next year and $39 the following. And the last is 1% on the $500,000 and above is $18 million or $19 million moving forward. You may recall 2 years ago when I got up on the floor, everybody was saying, oh, I'm the tax the rich guy. What I was trying to do was I was trying to stop what we were doing. We were reducing the taxes on the people that can afford to pay them, and we were placing that burden on the people that we represent, which is the neighbors that live around us, people on fixed incomes. We were led to believe that if we don't give breaks for the people that make the most money, the job creators, they're going to leave. The only people that are leaving Rhode Island are people that are on fixed incomes because they can no longer afford to live here. We stole $200 million from the cities and towns through revenue sharing and through the automobile tax to pay for these tax breaks. So I think that we at least have to look at addressing this. I also support Rep. Semini's bill 100%, and I'm a co-sponsor, but I just wanted to throw that out there that you would see what can be generated for a small tax on a high income. So with that.
Representative Guthrie, if I can just cut you off for a second. I understand this is a very touchy topic for everyone, but we do have certain rules as far as allowing people behind you, in front of you, and the side of you to be able to see. So if you do have signs, if you could hold them down, everyone would appreciate it. Thank you. Representative Semini, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to testify today on Bill 7729, which is slightly different from Representative Guthrie's bills, because rather than doing a flat increase of income tax, it has a temporary increase of income tax. And the intent of this bill is to raise some much-needed revenue for the state of Rhode Island so that we can continue to fulfill our governmental obligation to provide services to our residents. As I said, this bill seeks to raise revenue by temporarily increasing the income taxes of higher income households. Specifically, it raises the income tax rate from 5.9% by 4 percentage points to 9.9%. This increase is meant to address our current economic climate, where we struggle in large part due to a high unemployment rate. Therefore, as the unemployment rate decreases, this tax increase will decrease as well until it once again reaches the 5.9%. I think it actually encourages people to create jobs because they know that if their unemployment rate goes down, then their taxes will go down as well. Currently, when we look at the total tax expense, that's sales tax, property tax, income tax, as a percentage of income, lower and middle income Rhode Islanders are paying a greater share of their income in taxes. The lowest 20% of earners in our state pay about 11.9% of their income in taxes, while the top 1% pay just 5.6% of their income in taxes. We must raise revenue in a fair way because we have already asked our low and middle income earners to sacrifice as we've closed previous deficits. But I believe our state has an obligation to do more than to just offer a balanced budget every year. We have an obligation to invest in our communities. I don't believe that there's much debate that we need to invest in our infrastructure, in workforce development, and in education. It is what the business community says that they need to be successful employers, and it's what communities need to thrive. Yet for the past several years, we have addressed our economic crises not through investment, but by cutting programs that ensure that our workforce is healthy, educated, skilled, and able to go to work. As we've faced deficits over the past few years, we've cut programs that support low and middle income families. We've made cuts to child care programs that support working families. We've cut parents and children from right care. We've cut funding for supports and services for the developmental disabled community. We've cut state support for seniors and disabled individuals. We've cut funding for affordable housing, and we've cut early childhood education, state support for higher education, and workforce development programs. Meanwhile, while we haven't raised taxes, we have raised fees. Those are flat costs that disproportionately impact the budgets of low and middle income families. These have included that at the DMV, license reinstatement fees have nearly doubled, and reinstating a registration has increased by 5 times over the previous cost. For those dependent on public transit, a cost of a trip on RIPTA has increased from $1.75 to $2 a ride. The cost of crossing the Newport Bridge has gone from $2 to $4 and will soon go to $5. We've even charged families to take advantage of our state's natural resources by going to our state beaches. This bill is not an attempt to punish those who have been financially successful. It is asking those Rhode Islanders with resources to provide a little more to our state at a time when others can no longer do so. This bill is not an attempt to create insecurity in the business community by being inconsistent. It is telling our business community that they have chosen to settle in a state that will consistently invest in our workforce so that the economy does not suffer like this in the future. This bill creates consistencies for cities and towns struggling to manage their budgets, for families who need safe places for their children to be while they're at work, for young people trying to decide if they can afford to improve their skills and a chance at a better job by attending an institute of higher education in our state. We all, residents and businesses alike, rely on a government that can provide public safety, public health, public roads, public transit, and public education. Those services are suffering due to the economic downturn, but also due to economic policies that have cut taxes for those with the most. There is no question that Rhode Island is on shaky financial ground right now, and it's not really expected to stabilize anytime soon. But there are 3 ways to balance a budget when we're short on resources. We can cut services, we can raise revenue, or do a combination of both. I think we've cut services for many years, and we must now look to fair ways to raise revenue for the benefit of everyone. I appreciate you listening. I'm happy to take any questions. I also want to let you know that we have a guest here tonight, Mr. Chuck Collins, who's an author of the book 99 to 1, who will also be testifying as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, representatives. Does anyone have any questions for Representative Samini or Representative Guthrie? We thank you very much for your testimony. I will be going into the witness list, which is 8 pages long. I ask that everyone be considerate to the people that are waiting, and if you could just keep your testimony to the point, give you a couple of minutes just to view your point, and that way we don't have to be repeating what we've already heard. So if I can call up Ken Block. Ken's away. Okay, then we can call him up at that time. There are people that are signed up on both Representative Samini's bills and Representative Guthrie's bills. So if I could have Michael Puyana and Diane McLaughlin. And is Steve Collin here from the chamber? Michael, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to make it clear that the Rhode Island Tea Party is firmly opposed to all these bills which propose to raise the income tax.
I appreciate your testimony very much. Thank you. Emmanuel Fallock, Abel Collins, Don Rhodes. Paul Valletta. Paul left. Excuse me. Okay. Randall Rose. And is it Patricia Robb?
I think she's gone.
Okay. Good evening. Abel, would you like to start?
Hi. Thank you all for staying this long here tonight. My name's Abel Collins. I work for the Sierra Club in Rhode Island. We're an environmental organization, but come before you here today to talk about tax policy, something that, or income tax policy, something that Sierra Club does not normally take a stance on. But circumstances in the state demand it. We are facing a severe lack of revenue in this state. There are a lot of needs out there. I'd like to take a step back from some of the testimony that we've heard, cast aside sort of the comparisons with other states, and really just ask, what do we want to do with Rhode Island? We're all Rhode Islanders. What do the 100% of us want to see out of Rhode Island? Stop thinking about this as an issue of the 1% versus the 99% or the 2% versus the 98%. Where do we want to go as Rhode Islanders? Do we want to invest in this state and provide services so everybody can succeed? Those are the questions that we all need to answer as Rhode Islanders, and that people here have a duty to answer. Right now, we're facing a $118 million deficit. Even that would only get us back to providing the services that we're currently providing. And we're deferring expenses on massive projects in terms of infrastructure. One of my specialties here in Rhode Island is talking about transportation reform. The Department of Transportation estimates that they need about $300 million worth of repairs and ongoing maintenance construction just to keep Rhode Island's roads in working condition. Now, that money right now is money that we borrow. So that's money that Tom Seguros would say we're foisting on our future selves or hiding through debt. We can no longer do this. Other states pay as they go. We need to start thinking about paying as we go. Otherwise, the cost for our children, not just for transportation, but for all these issues, are going to be significantly higher than they would be for us if we choose to pay for them right now. So I think, investment now will pay off in the future. And I would be so bold as to say that if the bank accounts of the top 1% earners at the end of the year are somewhat lower, a few $1,000s lower, they will still be better off at the end of the year if we invest more in this state. They use our roads. They enjoy our beautiful beaches, our clean water. These are services that we pay for and that they cannot get without the state's funding. And we're all in this together. What does the 100% of us want? What are we going to do? We need resources to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel. Mr. Rose?
Thank you. I'm here to speak as a member of Occupy Providence, like a number of the people who have already spoken, and although they are also affiliated with other organizations. I wanted to talk a little about the statistics that you've been hearing. There have been statistics marshaled on both sides, and we all know that there are many ways of calculating tax rates and many ways of making each state look to be as if it has one of the highest tax rates in the country. But I just wanted to propose to you a way of telling which direction things are really going in. So You've all seen this chart already that Tom Skouros handed to you of the decrease in effective tax rate and the increase in unemployment. And of course, it is worth questioning what's the right way to measure the tax rate, what's the right way to measure how the economy is doing. In this chart, of course, it's true that the tax rate on ordinary people has basically not changed. But regardless of whether you believe, whether you're skeptical of these figures, this specific way of measuring things or not, I just want to point out, for the last 15 years that this chart covers, we haven't seen the advocates of the wealthy complain about the direction that things are going in. The advocates of the wealthy may say that taxes on the wealthy have gone up, but they never complain about it. They never say that they want to go back. And that suggests to me that actually policy has been moving in a direction that lowers the actual tax payments on the wealthy, and that doesn't rely on any particular way of measuring things. It just relies on what you see the lobbyists actually doing. And on the other hand, if we all know that in the mid-'90s, a much more prosperous time, the top tax rate was 10.89%. That's what the tax rate we had after a financial crisis, after the savings and loan crisis with the failure of RISDIC. And we did get out of that financial crisis by taxing the wealthy. Now we're in the aftermath of another financial crisis, and we know the unemployment rate is much higher. It's 11.1% and rising. It used to be about 5% in 1996. But if you look at you may dispute that the unemployment rate is a way of measuring how the economy is going, but really, regardless of what particular statistic you look at, it remains true that any ordinary person you talk to will say the economy is doing worse. Nobody feels that nobody feels that things were worse for ordinary people back in the mid-'90s when we had a higher tax rate. Everybody thinks that we'd like to go back to how things were in the mid-'90s. So I just want to point out that this is not really a question of how to measure, which statistics to rely on, which measurements to use. I want to point out that objectively, there are ways to tell which statistics are reliable and which ones aren't. And we can see what direction things are going in. Massachusetts, for instance, has a tax rate, not the 5.3% that you're often quoted, but a tax rate of 12% on certain kinds of income. And they are doing, by all measures, much better economically than we are. So I wanted to point this out. And when I talk to strangers from other parts of the country, what they think of when they think about Rhode Island is they think of all the things they've been hearing about bankruptcies and near bankruptcy measures that are going on in Rhode Island, and that really affects the perception of Rhode Island and the rest of the country. It's not just a matter. Of can Rhode Island compete by keeping their tax rate as low as possible, sending its municipalities into bankruptcy and near bankruptcy measures? Because actually, this talk of bankruptcy, the measures that have been taken short of bankruptcy, are making Rhode Island's reputation worse, and not a place where talented people will want to go and look for jobs, not a place where people will want to go and stay after getting an education. And that is what and everybody can see that the direction that our policies are going in is one that benefits the advocates of the wealthy, who are never complaining, and is doing absolutely nothing to make things better for ordinary people. We've been told for many years that if you do these tax changes, it will make things better for ordinary people. If that was happening even to a slight degree, we would not have an economy that is much worse now. So I think we can see that these things are myths, and you've already been given studies showing that fact. So it's what is really happening is that we as a state are pursuing policies that lead to a declining economy, lead to failures right now at the municipal level, and that put us on a path to becoming a low-service, low-education state. I mean, yes, we can become Arkansas, but most people see that we're heading in that direction, and they don't want it. They realize that we're on the wrong path. We've been following it for many, many years. And right now, we have some bills that have been proposed. I definitely don't think that any of these bills go far enough. Nobody in Occupy Providence thinks they go far enough. But we have these bills like H 7729, which has 37 co-sponsors, almost a majority, and it's a chance to move in a better direction. And I really have no and it is also the kind of thing that's very popular here. One of the reasons why Senator Whitehouse was willing to be the one who would be the official sponsor of the Buffett Rule bill is because these kinds of measures are popular in Rhode Island, more popular perhaps than in other states. And a lot of people, as I've been saying, see that we're on a path that goes in the wrong direction. They'd like to see something that reverses it, because giving tax changes that the advocates for the wealthy ask for has not been working. So for all these reasons, I think it would be a very constructive thing to do to get us off this trajectory towards a reputation for flirting with bankruptcy, off this trajectory towards being like Arkansas. And on the other hand, Occupy Providence has no illusions about this. We realize that a bill that already has close to a majority in favor of it is going to be voted on here. There's going to be a vote to hold it for further study. It's not even going to reach the floor. And we think that this shows that there's something broken about the process. We do think, and that is why this lack of legitimacy, which more and more people are perceiving, comes from facts like what's shown in this chart, and is part of the reason why Occupy Providence and similar groups have arisen as part of the 99% movement. Occupy Providence is only one small part of the 99% movement, but we just wanted to point out to you and to the rest of the public why we think that it's so important that we have to change the trajectory we are on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Emmanuel Falk. I'm the director of the SEIU State Council. We represent over 6,000 union members in both the private and public sector. Before I get into the meat of my testimony, I do want to comment a little bit on the Tax Foundation that was referenced. And while the Tax Foundation compiles tremendous raw data for all 50 states, which I even use for Rhode Island myself, I think we have to be careful and suspicious of rankings that they do. These are a little more subjective. And the thing to remember about the Tax Foundation is that it was formed in 1937 in response to the passage of Social Security. So in its history, it was created to slow down the New Deal and the public works program that Roosevelt was attempting to put in. Fast forward 75 years later, and you can do a quick search on this. The Tax Foundation receives a great deal of funding from ExxonMobil, from the Koch brothers. One of their prominent board of directors is a woman named Pamela Olson, who was a economic advisor for the second George Bush in his presidency. So I think when you see these rankings, I think you should be very skeptical. They come from a right-wing think tank that really is representing the interests of the 1% and those that fund them. People have said a lot of what I wanted to say today. I as an organization that's completely funded, run by and made up of the middle class, I do want to say that I think our tax policies are pretty broken, and that's why we do support both the legislation by Representative Samiti and the Guthrie bills, because they begin to bring tax fairness and begin to reverse some of the tax cuts that the wealthy have gotten post-2005. Specifically, I mentioned the middle class, and and people have talked about the beach fees, car taxes. I do want to talk a little bit more about the 8.5% tuition hikes, because this affects a lot of our CNAs and CMTs that are actually going back to school. They're going to nursing programs, in some cases full-time. They have kids, but they're doing it anyway so they can climb the career ladder. And they're facing 8.5% tuition hikes just this year alone. And that's not just a one-year tuition hike. That gets compounded, compounds their student debt, because they have to pay that increased rate for years. So we're actually saddling the next generation of the workforce with greater student debt, not just for 1 year, but for many years to come. I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot about jobs, and the lack of revenue is actually hurting, in many ways, the biggest private sector job creator we have in the state, which is the hospitals. And we represent 2,000 workers in hospitals in Rhode Island. And in order to balance the budget, hospitals are having to pay a higher license fee. There's been an increasing move to take away money that was usually earmarked for uncompensated care. The state is now holding on to that in order to balance the budget. And this has injected uncertainty. It's hurt the bottom line for hospitals. They're not hiring as many folks. And we're actually, in order to balance the budget each year, we are actually hurting the largest private sector employer. Not to mention, because of the lack of municipal aid, cities like Providence are now looking to tax hospitals, which will further saddle one of the largest economic engines in the state. So that was the only really different thing I wanted to add. I would take any questions. And again, I appreciate members of the committee staying up this late and listening on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Any questions of this panel? No. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your testimony. I'd like to ask Scott Dumel and Bill McCourt and Steve Dressler. We will